Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel. We're looking at Daniel chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar's second dream. His first dream, of course, was in chapter 2, and then yesterday we began to look at chapter 4, the second dream that he had. Now, chapter 4 is a little different because we saw it is the testimony of Nebuchadnezzar. The whole chapter is containing the words of Nebuchadnezzar as he tells about his dream, how Daniel interpreted it, and its impact upon him. Let's begin reading in verse 9. Nebuchadnezzar says, Now Belteshazzar, remember Belteshazzar is the Babylonian name of Daniel, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is too difficult for you. Here's my dream. Interpret it for me. So Nebuchadnezzar brings Daniel before him and says, I know the Spirit of God is in you. This has been demonstrated in the past. I've had this dream. Hear it and interpret it for me. And so he gives Daniel the dream. These are the visions I saw while lying in my bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. The height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong. Its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful. Its fruit was abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it the wild animals found shelter. The birds lived in the branches. From it every creature was fed. Now in the visions I saw while lying on my bed, I looked, and there before me was a holy one, a messenger coming down from heaven. He called in a loud voice, Cut down the tree and trim off its branches. Strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But let the stump and the roots, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal, till 7 times pass by for him. This decision is announced by messengers. The holy ones declare the verdict, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms on earth, and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowliest of people. Now, this was the dream as Nebuchadnezzar had it, and he told it to Daniel, of a great tree that was cut down by order of God. An angel came to announce God's decree. The tree was cut down, only the stump remained. And then the dream changes. It's been talking about a tree, but then it begins to talk about a person. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. Let him have the mind of an animal for 7 times, that all may know that God ordains who rules over the world. God sets up kingdoms and brings them down. So Nebuchadnezzar is alarmed by his dream. What can it mean? And he also realizes it has reference to a person, because in the midst of the dream, the pronoun changed from referring to an it, the tree, to a him, a person. I think he probably suspects the him might be himself. He may think that this dream and somehow refers to me. And so he calls Daniel, gives him the dream, and says, interpret it for me. Now, before we get into the specifics of the dream and its interpretation, you may be wondering how much time had passed between Nebuchadnezzar's first dream in chapter 2 and this his second dream in chapter 4. I suspect many, many years have passed. Now, Nebuchadnezzar ruled Babylon as king from the year 605 BC to the year 562 BC. You might also remember that the year 605 was the year that Jerusalem and Judea first came under the sovereignty of Babylon. They became a vassal state of Babylon. We saw that in our opening session. Nebuchadnezzar had accomplished that in the very early days of his reign. That's when Daniel had been transplanted to Babylon, way back in around 605 BC. So Daniel has been in Babylon the whole time that Nebuchadnezzar has been king. Now, we are told that the dream in chapter 2 occurred early in Nebuchadnezzar's reigns, probably around 602, 601, 600 BC, somewhere in that range. This dream, we're not given a date on it, but it seems to occur much later in Nebuchadnezzar's reign, toward the latter part of his reign, maybe 570, 568, somewhere in that range. And I tell you that to let you know that probably at least 30 years have passed since the first dream, in chapter 2 of the four kingdoms that will be followed by the kingdom of God. 30 years have passed, and now he has this dream about a large tree that is cut down, and about someone having the mind of an animal for 7 times, probably 7 years. Nebuchadnezzar had remembered his first dream 30 years before and how Daniel interpreted it, so he brings him back in. Now, Daniel's a much older man. Now, Daniel was probably a teenager, maybe 16, 17, 18 for the first dream. So now, 30 years later, he's almost mid-age, around 50, somewhere in that range. So now he comes as a much older man, a lot more years of experience, but still able to give the interpretation of the dream. And it's going to be a stark interpretation for Nebuchadnezzar. It's going to shake him to the core of his being. It's going to lead to the testimony that he gives. We'll begin to look at the specifics of the dream in our next session. So join us then for our next 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel.